Okay, so right, we were talking about William Perry's scale of cognitive growth and how we go from that dualistic either-or thinking as an adolescent to becoming more cognitively flexible, thinking this multiplicity into contextualism where you can see that there are varying different opinions and points of view even amongst experts, and you become more cognitively flexible and your thinking becomes reflective, right? So it's reflective and expansive, and this usually takes place through higher education. Sure, I think people can probably go through these cognitive changes on the job if they're working, but if you're not in a job that's requiring you to do a lot of higher level problem solving, you may not go through this process of changing in the way you think. One thing that they do mention in your textbook in looking at differences between men and women in college is that we still have a pretty strong gender bias, and in the college setting and in the college classroom. And in particular, we have a real imbalance in fields of study. Like, what is it that women are going into for careers versus men? It's starting to balance out. I mean, we have more women in college than men in general. And so more are graduating with bachelor's degrees. Your generation has more people graduating from college than any previous generation to begin with. But then we have more women graduating, yet we still then have this imbalance in number of women going into the sciences, technology, engineering, those STEM fields. What's going on there? Why is there such an imbalance? And if you look back at the research from Claude Steele in the 1990s, he found that people have these antiquated stereotypes that are sort of deeply embedded in their thought process that they're unaware of. And he called it a stereotype threat. So we know what all the different stereotypes are for the different races and gender and sexual orientation and whatever different groups of people. We know what those stereotypes are just from being exposed to the world. You may not believe them, and you may actually realize that a lot of them are completely false, but we know what they are, and they kind of, they readily come to mind. You may not act on them, but you know what they are, and if you know what your own stereotypes are, whether that be, you know, based on your race or based on your ethnicity or based on your gender or your age, you know what they are, and if they're the negative ones can harm you. And this is kind of happening unconsciously, so that's why I called it a stereotype threat. It's like a threat in the air, like kind of like a cloud that sort of hangs over top of you and follows you around. And people do this really bizarre thing where they inadvertently act out the stereotype. So his first studies were done with gender, and the classic study was where they had high-level math students, they were calculus students, come in and take a math test, and it was like the most difficult calculus test the professors could come up with. And they had a control group and an experimental group. And in the control group, they didn't say anything. They just had them take the test. They found no differences between males and females in how well they performed on this really difficult math test. In the experimental group, the graduate assistant read from a script, gave them a prompt, and said, this calculus test has been taken nationwide, and it's been found that males have outperformed females by X percent, you know, and they gave them all this fake information. It was totally false, made up data. But now you just heard that. So imagine you know you're a female and you are in this calculus class. You're good at math, but you've just been told that males outperform you. And so that is now hanging over your head. You're thinking about it, and it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And in that experimental group, they found the females did underperform. The males did just as well as in the the control group. They didn't have any differences, but the females way underperformed. So Steele said this definitely shows this stereotype threat. And then he's changed the experiment, and other researchers have done similar experiments where they've said differences between blacks and whites. And whatever the stereotype is for that particular group, they give the prompt, makes you think of it, you know that, so there's this stereotype that women aren't as good at math than men. Have you heard that stereotype before? I mean, it's pretty antiquated, it's fairly outdated, and we know it's completely false. There's nothing about your brain that makes you like not as good at math. You know, maybe when you're like 4 years old, maybe your brain is getting sort of wired in a different order, but not by the time you're in college. And we already established a baseline. You're all made it into this class, yet, you know, having that sort of thing hanging over your head, going, oh, okay, I'm not as good at this. Then you exert. It's this sort of oxymoron that you then actually play into the stereotype. So, you know, looking at these differences then in performance, we've got to figure out how can we eliminate, you know, this gender bias, and then maybe our teachers doing it. It's like the Pygmalion in the classroom. Is the teacher accidentally giving extra attention to certain types of people, or calling on them, or paying attention to them, and then do they continue to do that in the college setting? And how does that affect your choice of major and your career choice, and then how you go on into the workplace? Maybe this becomes institutionalized then in the workplace, and you have differences. I mean, we have our vice president of instruction here at the college is a female, and a lot of the deans are females. The president's a male. A lot of the other lead faculty are male. My department is kind of split, kind of balanced between males and females. I think we do an okay job here at this institution, but then if we were to compare like professors at a place like MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, it's out of whack. There's way more men than women. And then all the deans and the president, I mean, it's just way more male dominated. So how much of this stereotype threat has been infused in other aspects of culture? And so I think if you are aware that, oh my gosh, I'm doing this because I'm thinking about this stuff, and just reassure yourself that that's an old stereotype and it's not true. I can do these things. That's the best way to break through any kind of threat. Problem is, it's unconscious. You don't know you're doing it. Okay, but we do know that education is the key towards greater wealth and greater success and greater opportunity. And then there's a correlation with that and happiness. That gets a little bit fuzzy because, usually you want to feel job satisfaction is more important. People report that as being more important than how much money they actually have. Obviously, you don't want to be in poverty, right? But being college educated does enhance this ability to think faster, be more reflective, to use your critical thinking skills. I've met lots of adults that are in their 50s and 60s that have never gotten to this sort of post-formal thought. And it's probably because they haven't gone through this rigorous process of thinking about things and reflecting and, learning about, studying something deeply, right, and looking for meaning in it. So it's at any age, anybody can go through this. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what's happening to your body. All right, so you reach your full growth. It depends on your genetics. Females usually reach their full height really early. Really early in adolescence. Males a little bit later. But then your body continues to change, and your body composition changes as you're getting into your 20s. But then physical performance tends to peak in the 20s. It depends on whether you're a male or a female, and it depends on exactly what you're doing. But I mean, definitely a 28-year-old is going to throw a ball harder and faster than a 14-year-old. Even if it's a 14-year-old who's on his way to be a baseball star, right? They're just going to be stronger and be able to do lift more, right? Because their body has that strength and the muscle mass. So we peak at about age 30, and you're pretty healthy, right? But then, right as soon as you're done growing, you actually start to decline. As soon as you reach your peak performance, you will start to decline. And this is called primary aging or senescence. So senescence, sometimes we think of that word as being senile. You go, oh my gosh, I'm senile, like as if you're like losing your mind or going crazy or getting forgetful. All it means is aging. And it's the primary natural aging of your body. Right? So your body becomes less efficient, meaning that your metabolism is going to slow down naturally. And you're going to start losing muscle mass and gaining body fat, and your body composition does change. And so then that means that maybe you need to do some changes in your lifestyle if you don't want to gain weight or lose strength. So we can do things to counteract this natural decline. But then there's some things that maybe you just aren't going to be as fast a runner or fast a swimmer or throw the ball or kick the ball as hard as you used to when you were at your peak performance. Although you'll be surprised if you keep up with it, keep up with your physical conditioning and take care of your body, you can probably maintain for quite a long time. We have to be leery when we see people that are professional athletes or Olympians that are peaking later. Well, that's their full-time job, right? So they may peak later or be able to remain in professional athletics through their 30s. But depending on the sport, you don't very often see people over 40 as professional athletes. It kind of depends on the sport, but I think there's a couple people in professional soccer that are around 40, and that's about the end. It's amazing that they're still playing because of injury. The chances of injury are so great for a sport like that. Okay, so what's happening then is, you have a set point. Set point is what's sort of genetically predetermined, what your body can best function at to maintain homeostasis. So your body wants to, needs energy coming in through calories, and then you need some of those calories just to sustain life. And then depending on how active you are, you'll need more calories to sustain that level of activity. And so a lot of it is affected by your genetics, just like height. Height's largely that's affected by genetics. And your body gets kind of used to this. The thing is, if you do gain weight because of lifestyle, so this is where you get the environment interacting, then your body gets used to that set point. And it gets used to functioning at getting that amount of calories. And now you have that much more body fat, and your brain says, okay, you got to keep eating because we need to sustain this body fat that you have. As soon as you don't get enough calories, you'll have, neurotransmitters sending signals down to your body. And then the final piece of the kickback loop is leptin, which is a hormone that's coming from your adipose tissues, coming from your body fat. And so you're actually getting the leptin signal from how big you are. And that's telling your brain then, okay, keep eating. And then as soon as you're, sustained enough to maintain that size, then the leptin signal says, okay, stop, and it's all going through your hypothalamus. So it's hard to, once you get to a certain size, and you've kind of been operating at that size for a while, it's hard to lose weight because you're going to be starving, right? You're not getting, you still have that fat that's telling your brain, eat, eat, eat. So because we know with age, your metabolism is naturally going to be slowing down, naturally things become less efficient, then we probably need to adjust our lifestyle. Can you eat the same way at 25 as you did when you were 15? No. Can you eat the same way at 25 as when you were 18, 19, fully grown? No, probably not, right? Your metabolism is slower, and then also probably you're not as active, right? When you're in high school, like, you're kind of constantly on the go. You're constantly being told, like just like they had in that video, you're constantly being told where to be, what to do. You have a million activities. It's like that over-programming of the high school teenager. And then by the time you get a chance to sit down and eat, then you eat like you're, a garbage disposal, right? You just eat everything, just eat huge quantities of food, and you don't gain any weight because you're young and super active, right? So then as you get older, you've got these natural body shifts taking place, and now all of a sudden you have all this time, right? You don't have to be a million places in a day. You got big gaps in the middle of the day between classes, or you're now living alone, and so somebody else isn't cooking for you, so you're figuring out what to feed yourself. And this is often when people will gain weight in their early 20s, is really more from lifestyle than actual aging. But it is a combination, obviously. Okay, so, but what's interesting is most young adults know what it is that they should do, yet they do all sorts of things that they shouldn't do. So let's make a list of some of the bad health habits of young adults. We can just brainstorm it here on the board. Okay, so what are some bad health habits of young adults? Kaylee? Okay, eating late at night. What else? Yeah, Jenna? Drinking alcohol in excess. Binge drinking. Yeah. Okay, so eating junk food or unhealthy food. Yeah, I mean, they tend to be cheaper. We learned that in that video we watched a few weeks ago about how the processed foods are cheap to manufacture, therefore they're less expensive, and then they have all the sales and whatnot, and so, and they're fast and easy. Yeah? Less sleep. Sure, you get less sleep because you're out drinking alcohol, out partying, and yeah, Inga? Eating out. So, right. Yes, a lot adults of all ages will go the easy route, eat out and fast food. Yeah, it's crazy how many Americans, like that Jamie Oliver program where he went around and found all the eating habits of American families, and what did they say that the average American family eats at fast food how many days a week? Do you remember? 2 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week. That's crazy. Like,
they don't even read the nutrition label. Like, that lady didn't even know what was in Mountain Dew.
Right. They have, so people have no idea how many calories they're consuming because it's just quick and easy and maybe cheaper on the run. Yeah, Rihanna?
I was going to say inactive.
Just inactive. Okay. If you were in athletics when you were in high school and now you've graduated, maybe you're in college or you're working, nobody's making you go to practice. Or if you're like me, I was pretty burnt out from swimming. I mean, the double workouts for so many years, and I was just like, done. I'm not going to swim. And so then I tried to do other things, you know, aerobics and biking, and tried to run. I'm a pitiful runner. And so I was always trying to exercise, but because I wasn't necessarily really good at it or had a reason to be there, like the dedication and the motivation was kind of would drop. And so, and also maybe I probably didn't work out as hard as I would when I would go to the pool, because I wasn't as confident at it or persistent. So then you become less active. Okay, so affording the gym membership can be part of it, yeah. People skip breakfast, and you realize that breakfast is what boosts your metabolism the whole rest of the day. So you guys know this, yet you then still skip breakfast. Why do you skip breakfast? Even you know that, right? You've read about it. You don't have time. You're like, okay, I don't have time. You sleep late. Okay, so you go to bed. You're sleeping less, and you know that there's a correlation between people who get 5 hours or less of sleep a night and being obese. So the lack of sleep, you wake up, they find is that obese people who get fewer than 5 hours of sleep a night wake up with really, really high ghrelin levels, which is a hormone that's produced from your stomach that makes you hungry, makes you say, oh, I'm hungry, and really, really low leptin levels. So it's like they wake up hungry, wake up starving. So it kind of feeds the cycle. Yeah?
Coffee and energy drinks to keep us awake.
Okay, so then you do all this caffeine that could harm your health or just keep you jacked up too long. Yeah?
My friends like go to universities. It's like even in the dining hall, it's not as good of food. Probably like your parents were making you.
Right. Okay. So we have this thing called. Okay. So you go to the dining hall if you're at a university, and you buy a dining plan, and often it's just you swipe your card. This is how it was at Boston University, and a lot of schools. You swipe your card when you enter, and it just ticks off one meal off your plan, or it depends on what kind of plan you have. And then it's a free-for-all. You just take whatever you want. And I know at BU, these different dining plans, you could stay there as long as they were open. So some people would, they'd go and they'd get their food and they'd sit down and then they'd be studying and you'd be there. And you go, oh, okay, I'm going to get another cookie. Oh, okay. You just keep going up and getting stuff. And so, but that also happens at buffets. It's called the cafeteria diet effect. Not really a diet, right? It's not a diet at all. When you have lots of choices, you tend to sample, and then next thing you know, you've eaten too much. And then often they're not good choices. Yeah, Priscilla? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so if you're, some people will eat when they're stressed. Some people will not eat when they're stressed, but then that's altering their metabolism. If you put yourself into sort of starvation mode, then the next thing you know, you'll have a big binge. So lots of this yo-yo eating behavior is not good for your health. We talked about eating disorders a little bit last week, right? That kind of behavior can be hard to break out of that cycle even later in adulthood. Yeah, Jenna?
I feel like when you're younger too, like socially going out for like ice cream and stuff like that, like you go out with all your friends.
So sometimes just
There to tell you like no, stay home.
sometimes going out socially is about food, dessert. Yeah, yeah. We used to go to the frozen yogurt place on the Ave. At least that was better than going to Haagen-Dazs, but no, it's not better. Haagen-Dazs is clearly better, but we would at least go to frozen yogurt.
That satisfies you, but frozen yogurt has no fat, just a lot of sugar, which is like worse.
It's like non-fat milk. It's more sugar.
Yeah. Yeah, Carmen?
I think even having a lot of Starbucks would probably be pretty too. That's like confidential in America, you know, and they're on every block.
Starbucks, yeah. You know, I love that they have the calorie information now at a lot of places like Starbucks. It absolutely is a deterrent. When you're standing there waiting and you're looking at some like pastry or something and it tells you that it's 400 calories, I do not buy it. If it didn't have the calorie information on there, I would maybe buy it if I was hungry. But I see that and I go, oh God, that's like a...
Syrups and stuff are so, I'm a barista, and like the syrups, oh my gosh, never read the nutrition facts.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I work at Starbucks. There's people who go there like 4 times.
It's a crazy amount of calories. So people have no idea how many calories they're consuming. Then they have these other, they're more sedentary than they used to be when they were adolescents. They're not getting enough sleep, and then maybe they're drinking. And alcohol. Think about how many calories are in alcohol, right? So you can gain weight that way, and then kind of couple it with this natural progression of your metabolism slowing down and becoming less efficient, in just general recovery. Yeah.
Also, in early adulthood, we have a greater, like we could have more sexual partners, which opens your whole brain.
Okay, another one. So you may have more casual sex, or more sexual, maybe not casual sex, but we call it serial monogamy. So you date one person for 6 months and you're only with that person, but then you break up and then you date another person for 6 months. So you have more partners in early adulthood, so that could open you up to more STIs, right? Yeah, Kara?
So like substance abuse.
And more likely to abuse substances, right? Okay. One more?
I think also, like, I remember watching a video a long time ago that was talking about the portion sizes in the 1950s. Like, if coffee was like this big or a donut was like this big versus nowadays, like a coffee's like a 16 ounce.
Yeah, portion size.
Everything's just way bigger now, and so.
Supersize Me. Yeah, does anybody watch that documentary, Supersize Me? It's really good. It'll make you really scared of McDonald's. The guy went into liver failure after a month, right? Didn't he? It was like really scary, and he gained 20 pounds in a month. He ate McDonald's every day, and right, the supersize. So now they are not allowed to say supersize. It's a medium and a large, right? And then, did you just read about the chemical that they make the buns out of? It's the same chemical that they put in foam, like foam, rubber foam. I can't remember the name of the Subway, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, which we don't have around here, but all of those fast food restaurants, they have the same chemical that they put in foam mattresses, yoga mats. Yeah.
They don't do it in Europe.
Yeah. So Subway said that they were going to stop doing it. Because I was like, oh man, if I'm ever out, if I'm traveling and I think, oh, I do need to actually pick something up to eat, I will often choose Subway. Now I'm like, what?
Are there like meats and stuff or like super overcooked stuff? Because that's what I always choose.
Yeah. Get the veggie one. I get the veggie one.
With no bread, just.
Just eat vegetables. They probably look at you like, what?
I get the veggie stuff.
Yeah.
Meatballs are actually like tofu.
And the meatballs are tofu,
Yeah, it's tofu with like seafood there.
which is soy. So, which is, oh, it's not natural. Okay. All right. So what's this? This is a total oxymoron, right? We have an obesity epidemic, yet Americans spend $40 billion a year trying to lose weight. And so it's clearly not working. We know it's about the lifestyle, it's not about the diet, right? Anytime, like you hear all this stuff about the, what's the latest herbal pill that they've been pushing out there? I can't remember what it's called. Well, green coffee extract. If it sounds too good to be true, when you see the ad that pops up on the side of your Facebook page that says, lose weight without doing anything. It's like, that's too good to be true. It's probably going to do some other crazy bad thing to your body. So be skeptical in all of those things. I mean, it really comes down to calories in, calories out. That's absolutely the only way to, you have to have, fewer calories going in than, your expenditure. So that's the magic formula. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that I guess technically you could eat jelly beans, just like eat some jelly beans and nothing else, and you could lose weight, but that's not good, right? And that can create eating disorders, not to mention nutrient deficits, right? But it's just become this obsession, and the quick and easy way is what people are willing to spend so much money. I spend $75 a month for my gym and swim membership, but I get coached workouts in that because I kind of weighed and balanced. I'm like, okay, I could go to this other place for like $40 a month, but then I don't get any coached workouts. And so I go to this particular place because I get to swim with a group of people. I have a coach who then makes me more accountable. And then I'm with a group of people that have now become my friends. And then I tell you, I have made my class schedule. So I go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I don't teach in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So that's my time. And then any like tomorrow morning, I will get up and I will go because I go, okay, I'm paying that money. And I made my work schedule fit around it, so I better go. Plus, then I get texts from my friends. They're like, where are you? And I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess I better go to the pool. So that's kind of the formula for success, is to find something that you like, and then maybe do it with other people. Then it becomes social, and it'll become a lifelong thing, not this temporary thing that you're doing. Sometimes people will say, oh, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to work out. Well, how much TV did you watch last night? Or how long did you, sleep in? So you could probably figure it out. Yeah, it's challenging, but you can, if you program it into your day, you can figure it out. Yet we have 67% of adult Americans, and I think that statistic is age 20 and older. 67% are overweight. And then we've got about 25%, actually I think it's gone up since I made this slide, that are obese. So obesity, that's a body mass index of 30 or higher. You have to take the BMI into account with age and gender, as well as if you're an athlete, because weight it's more about body composition. You could be really muscular and have a low body fat percentage and appear obese on the BMI scale. So always take that into account. Measure your waist. That would be one thing. But we know that it's linked to all sorts of increased risks. Hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and then stress. Stress adds on top of all of those diseases. Stress will compound any illness, right? Stress can cause illnesses, but stress will compound any illness that you already have. Okay, so we mentioned drug use, and you guys mostly talked about alcohol. It's kind of interesting how drug use, and in particular alcohol use, peaks right about the age that you become legal. It peaks around age 21, 22. People will engage in binge drinking, or these people are beer bonging. And then you're licensed now, you're 21, and so now you can go to the bars and stuff. And then all of a sudden people don't engage in as many of these abusive behaviors. It's sort of interesting. Maybe part of it is that you can't afford to do it because you got to get to work the next day, right? You have a job, you can't be hungover, or you've had enough negative experiences with it that you're like, okay, I'm bored with that, I'm done with that, I don't like throwing up. Throwing up is gross, right? And so, and your brain is more fully developed. So there are quite a few arguments as to, maybe why the drinking age is what it is. However, then the binge drinkers are the ones that are younger. You can abuse a drug without being addicted to it, right? All of these people here at this party, I mean, what's the chances of any of them being alcoholics? It's about a 1 in 9 chance that one of these folks will turn into an alcoholic from engaging in this type of behavior. So a lot of that could be genetic. So look at your mom and dad. Is there any alcoholism in your family? You might be that 1 in 9. So most people will grow out of it, not go on to become a drug addict. But sometimes I've been surprised at people who I thought, oh my gosh, I was like, oh, so-and-so is going to be an alcoholic. And no, they're not. And then someone else, I find out, oh, they had an intervention on so-and-so. And I'm like, really? Wow. So I think genetics is a big component in there, and what your brain chemistry is like. So there's my stat right there. 1 in 9 will continue to be turn into alcoholics. A binge, then, by definition, is 5 drinks in a row or more for female, 6 drinks in a row or more for male. So if you've had a binge, you're abusing alcohol. I think if you've ever been hungover or thrown up, that's a big indicator that you abused that night, right? But then if it becomes a problem in your relationships or your ability to get to school or go to work, then that's another real sign. That may not mean that you're physically dependent on it, because that's the addiction, is when you have a physical dependency where if you stop doing the drug, you feel shaky, you get withdrawals, you have cravings, you get physically feel sick. Those are signs of dependence, right, of addiction. Okay. Young adults will also take risky jobs. Part of this could be because their brain is still developing. Some of it could also be just for the thrill, being a firefighter, or this is a bike messenger, not wearing a helmet, and this would be called edge work. You're more likely to take a risky job like this when you're younger than when you're older, when maybe your physical capabilities have showed a little bit of a decline, as well as having other responsibilities and kind of realizing, oh, I maybe don't want to be darting between cars with my bike. And then maybe you also have a career that pays more money. Firefighters make good money, but so all of this can culminate in stress, right? You've got lots of demands and competition for better jobs, competition for getting into your different college programs. But what do we mean when we say stress? What is stress? What is it? Yeah. Anxiety? It's a process. So stress is not a thing that happens to you. Like something can be, it's how you interpret it. So if your interpretation of some event is that it's overwhelming, too taxing, and then it can manifest into, so you've got a stressor is the event, that then you go, okay, what's this thing that's happening to me? Is it a challenge or is it a threat? And so that's called appraisal. So primary appraisal is first determining, okay, is this a challenge? Is this a threat? What is this that's happening to me? How am I interpreting it? And then secondary appraisal is, can I cope, or how can I cope? So we all experience stressors, but depending on your personality, whether you view it as something that's maybe a challenge, some people need stress. The stress is what kind of prods you to get stuff done. Is anybody like that? And you can cope effectively. If it's not impairing your health, then your cognitive appraisal of it is that this is challenging, this is stimulating, this is like, I'm going to rise to the occasion, and you actually do really well. If your secondary appraisal of it is, I can't handle this, this is too much, then it's going to become overwhelming. You're going to be releasing those corticosteroids from your adrenal glands, flood your system, and ultimately impair your immune system, right? And then you catch a cold, and then you catch another virus, and then turns into hypertension and can cause all sorts of other health problems. Yeah? Yeah, I mean, there's generalized anxiety disorder. I mean, there's different types of anxiety disorders, but GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is where it's kind of like constantly feeling anxious. It's not necessarily attached to one single stressor, and it's not like post-traumatic stress disorder where you can attach it to something that happened to you. It's just kind of always there. But somehow your brain is kind of processing it in an illogical way. You're not really using your prefrontal cortex to analyze that, oh, hey, what's realistic? What's really going on here? Is this really a threat? And your brain is not able to sort that out, and so it's triggering your nervous system to make you feel constantly tense and anxious. So you can take some anti-anxiety medications and pair it with psychotherapy, where the psychotherapist would teach you how to identify what's a real threat and what's not a real threat. And or cognitive behavioral therapy, you go through several sessions where you're trying to identify what's the real stressors, what are, okay, this is normal, this happens to everybody. So that's why it's cognitive therapy. You're changing your way of thinking so that you can kind of slowly change your appraisal process. What brings it on? Maybe something happened to you that brought it on. Some people will need to take some anti-anxiety medications or some antidepressants even to help them through that process. But that is definitely a disorder that we can hopefully manage and teach coping skills, and maybe you can get off those medications eventually, especially since some of those can be addictive medications, physically addictive. So your stress reaction, then that's then your physical and emotional response to the stressor. So is it going to wear down on your immune system? Only if you are perceiving it as threatening and overwhelming, and you have that sort of switch that takes place in your adrenal glands where you start releasing too many corticosteroids. Corticosteroids are good initially because they reduce inflammation, right? They're there for a reason, but when it becomes prolonged, it starts attacking your lymphocytes, which are your white blood cells that fight off infection. So that's what makes stress is always can be an element then in any disease. We call those psychosomatic disorders or psychophysiological illness. I know Feldman says psychosomatic. I prefer psychophysiological disease, but just so you know that he uses that psychosomatic term. Okay, so stress then is really a process, right? So with experience, we're all going to face stress. You will learn new ways to cope as you're kind of going through that continued identity exploration. As things become a little bit more stable, then you'll have less stress, and just one thing at a time, one goal at a time. Right? Okay, so we already mentioned a little bit about how casual sex is more common in emerging adulthood. You're both more sexually active and less likely to be married or uncommitted. This statistic's a little bit daunting. Half of emerging adults in the U.S. have had at least one sexually transmitted infection. And you may not know that you had an STI until years later if you had something that didn't have some real physical symptoms like chlamydia in females, and you don't really know that you had a case, and then you find out later that your fallopian tubes have been fused, because that's what chlamydia can do, and cause infertility. But if you know the signs, if you use protection, we can avoid these things. That whole formula of if whoever you are in contact with sexually, you're kind of also been exposed to everybody that they've been in contact with, and so you get kind of like 3-4 partners down. It quickly goes to hundreds of people, depending on how sexually active the people that you've been with. And these things can get passed like wildfire. Like HPV, human papilloma virus, is silent. There's so many variations of the virus, and you may not know that you have it, and it just gets passed and passed and passed and passed. That's what the Pap smear is checking for, is HPV. Once you get to a certain age and you've had clear Paps for years, then they start saying, oh, you haven't changed partners, we don't need to do another Pap for 5 years. So that's what my doc just told me. She was like, well, we said 2 years, but now we're saying 5 years. And she's like, and you haven't changed partners? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, then do you want to just wait? You've got 4 more years. And I'm like, yeah, like why would I want that pinchy thing happening to me? I'll wait 4 more years, right? Okay. All right, so then that kind of gets into choices about your relationships. So sexuality is part of it, but then we're talking about partners. Are you going to be in a serious relationship, a committed relationship? Is it monogamous? Are you going to live together? Are you going to have children together? As well as then, how is the work and career fitting into this puzzle? So this kind of gets us into then Erikson's 6th stage of psychosocial development, called intimacy versus isolation. So remember, you always have to accomplish the previous stage successfully in order to move on to the next one. So you have to have had identity achievement, right? If you're still in role confusion, who am I? You're still trying to answer that question, and you try to get into a close relationship, Erikson said it's going to be difficult because if you're not really sure who you are, where you stand, or what you want to do, it's going to be difficult to commit in a relationship and have true intimacy. And that's why he said that often the early marriages, and of course he was talking about this back in the 1960s when people didn't cohabitate. That was, pretty unheard of. And he's, so then people, and also the taboo of premarital sex, so then often people did get married when they were 18 years old, 18, 19 years old. And then we have a higher occurrence of divorce, and Erikson said that he thought that the reason why there was a higher occurrence of divorce when people were very young, when they got married, was because they had not figured out their identity. You got to figure that out first before you can have intimacy in a relationship. So I thought that was kind of interesting in how he made this bridge, between the two. There's also been a lot of contemporary psychologists who have looked at this stage and reflected back on stage 1, trust versus mistrust, looking at what kind of trust was established in infancy and what kind of attachment and relationship a person has with their parents and had established in early childhood, infancy and early childhood, and how that can translate to their ability to form intimate relationships as a young adult. So if you aren't able to do this, you're going to end up isolating yourself from others. This is kind of a funny little clip here. We'll skip the ad here.
This is not going to work.
It doesn't work.
You look so great. I love you.
What?
Nothing. I said you're so great, and then I just stopped talking.
Would you look? I can't believe this.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
You love me.
No, no. Stop it.
That's the best part of the whole clip, right? Yeah, I mean, so if you ever watched Friends, if you used to watch that show, or they have the reruns on all the time on TBS. Chandler had a little bit of a difficult childhood. He had some issues with his parents. He hates Thanksgiving, right? Because Thanksgiving's family time, and so he didn't ever want to celebrate Thanksgiving. And Monica wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving, and she's trying to cheer him up. She puts a turkey on her head, and they're in a relationship, right? But he has these sort of intimacy issues with trust, and of course you know how that show, they end up together and everything. So he's got to resolve that, but if we apply Erikson's theory, we'd say, well, the reason maybe he's having intimacy issues in committing is because of trust issues from when he was a child. And once you've got those trust issues and then you've got your identity, then you can go into, this, have commitment in a relationship. Okay? You will continue to work on this through adulthood. Trust me. You will continue, and we'll talk about, after we do our group discussion, we'll talk about some different theories in relationships and how we do fluctuate throughout adulthood in your committed relationship with the different types of love. But, we also have intimacy with friendships. Right? So you don't have to be in a romantic committed relationship. You can also gain intimacy through friendships, be it, just your friends, one or two people. Intimacy, that word intimacy really means sharing and talking on a deep level, right? So you trust that person. But then, of course, when we're talking about a romantic relationship, there's the level of that trust, along with saying, hey, I'm going to just do this with you, right? We're going to be committed to each other. So then you have different choices as to who you're going to partner with and how you're going to live your lifestyle. And it's changed, considerably over the years. Our social norms have changed. You would not have heard of people living together romantically in a sexual relationship without being married. That wasn't really starting to happen until the 70s, and still not really socially accepted, and then a little more into the 80s. And even today, it's not as socially accepted. It depends on your upbringing. It depends on your sort of social network. But I think that as a society, it's definitely more accepted. So people then are more likely to engage in it. So cohabitation then means living together in a committed relationship that's sexual, it's romantic, it's sexual, but you're not married. Okay? So, the notion of cohabitation has changed over the years, and maybe this is why people are remaining single longer. If you have this as more of a socially accepted option, then you may live together for a while before you get married, or you may remain single in general longer. People also then have more partners, do more of that serial monogamy. People are more likely to get married in their late 20s, and I think that number just kind of keeps climbing. We'll see it get older and older. I think the last statistic I read, it was around 26 years old, average age of marriage. But then what are the statistics for the chances of staying together and the chances of divorce? So there are definitely lots of pros and cons to marriage versus cohabitation. And so what I want you to do is to get into small groups and come up with a list, and then we'll discuss it. Going again. Okay, so definitely cohabitation rates have gone up. We see some disadvantages in some social disapproval. Maybe it depends, it will vary family to family. But then, because you don't have that, some people will say, oh, well, cohabitation is just like marriage without the piece of paper. But is it really? No, I mean it really is quite different. And that piece of paper holds with it a lot of rights and a lot of, this is actually a lot of this data about the disadvantages of cohabitation, about having problems owning property, if you break up, how to divide things up, medical decisions, like, oh my gosh, if you're cohabitating with someone and your partner dies, you get nothing. All of these reasons, the legal side of it, are all arguments for same-sex marriage, because it's the same exact situation as cohabitation, because you have no rights. They show that they're more abusive. It's interesting. They'll show that they are more egalitarian in doing like chores, but then they're more abusive. So I'm not sure exactly why that might be. People tend to go from maybe one cohabitation to the next, to the next, to the next. But I've seen situations where people have lost all of their possessions, and sometimes because they're so hurt that they just leave their stuff because they just can't deal with it, and then they don't have legal recourse, even though they might be able to go back and get their stuff. They're just devastated. One of my friends had that happen to her, and not only had they bought the furniture and the television and everything together, they had bought it with her credit card that had not been paid off yet. So she left. Now, and that's just, you might just say, well, that's just stupid. But she was so hurt and devastated that she just left, and because probably they weren't on the same page. To her, this was a step towards marriage and maybe something different to him, and they didn't have that discussion. I don't know. But she left her stuff, or their stuff, and then she continued to pay off that credit card for the next 2 years. And I just remember thinking, wow, okay. So then the next serious relationship she had, she didn't live with them. They didn't move in together until after they were married. So legally, it's messier. You say, okay, it's easier to break up, but then what's this thing about the more likely to divorce? The statistic is really interesting, because you're more likely to, okay, so if you cohabitate with your partner and then you get married, you're more likely to get divorced. But then this other piece of this statistic that's really interesting, even if you don't marry that person you cohabitated with, so like my friend who I just gave the example to, she's more likely to get divorced because she cohabitated with somebody else years earlier. She's more likely to get divorced than like me. We didn't cohabitate. So, and I did not do it for religious reasons. I didn't do it for parent approval. I kind of did it for some of this, like, hey, are we on the same page? Are you really, really committed? And I wasn't willing to, and my friend had just gone through some of that stuff with losing all, and just being so devastated. So, and some of it was practical too. Like, it just wasn't practical to move in. But so what's up with that? Why do you think you're more likely, why statistically are you more likely to get divorced after cohabitation, even if it's not the same person? Katie?
I don't know if this is true, but people get more complacent about their partners. They don't really, because you see them every day, you live life every day next to them. Perhaps conversations that are really important, centering around life choices and whatnot, don't get brought up as often.
Yeah.
You just kind of let that fall to the wayside, and eventually you do decide to get married, and then it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're living together. Why don't we just make it official? And they don't really have these serious conversations that just kind of roll into the next stage of their relationship. And it could contribute to that.
Yeah, so maybe becoming more complacent, not taking it seriously. Do you think that making the decision to cohabitate should be a really serious decision? Yeah, and so perhaps people who are maybe more likely to cohabitate aren't having the serious discussion to make that decision. And maybe that's the problem. Because there was one little bit in the marriage myths that said if you already have plans in place to marry, like if you're engaged and you cohabitate and you live together while you're like planning a wedding and this thing is in sight, then you don't fall under that statistic. So you've already made that verbal commitment. And so that's kind of a separate category of people. And that's more common. I know we're totally running out of time. So marriage has changed. Divorce rate is still incredibly high. So that's kind of scary. The one thing about testing the waters, testing it out to see how, if they put the cap on the toothpaste and if they leave their dirty laundry on the bedroom floor, is that really important when it comes to a partnership? It is really not important, is it? So if that's the reason you think you need to live with someone to figure that out, I think that's kind of the wrong reason to move in with someone. You should have that serious discussion, not like this, and don't you hang around the person enough to know that? Don't you kind of know that? Okay, and I'll tell you, I've been married 13 years, and the dishes don't make it into the dishwasher. They go in the sink, and I don't know how. I've just stopped saying put the dishes in the dishwasher. It's not worth it. And my marriage isn't too important to get caught up in that nitpicky, silly stuff, right? But let's just I just want to very quickly introduce this important theory of love, Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love, where you have three components that make up the ideal love, according to Western culture. He calls this consummate love, where you have equal parts of passion, intimacy, and commitment. And as you grow and change in your relationship, you may fluctuate in your level of passion. You may kind of change in how much you disclose, self-disclosure to your partner over time. Things kind of change, as you age and relationships evolve. But when you are first in a relationship, you may have 7 different types of love in looking at this triangle then. So all 3 is the consummate love, But if you have just passion, that's like infatuation, right? That's just the, physical part of it. If you have just intimacy, that's friendship, right? So that would be like a uncommitted, sexless relationship. Just commitment would be empty love, which is maybe people who are staying in unhappy relationships or unhappy marriages. So they don't cheat, they don't break up, but they don't talk to each other and they don't have sex. Okay, not so good, right? Yeah, that's right. Passion and intimacy is romantic love. So this, you're like this person you talk to, you share with them, you have, attraction, but maybe you're not exclusive, or you haven't made the ultimate commitment, which, probably Sternberg and Erickson would say the ultimate commitment is the legalizing it, right? Some people will argue with that, but that's maybe in our society the ultimate show of commitment. Passion and commitment is factious love. That would be in, a committed relationship where you're having a lot of sex, or you have this erotic attachment, but you don't really talk to the person. You don't share, divulge. That would be a little bit less likely, because at some point then you would probably lose commitment, don't you think, over time? Friends with benefits, but then that's kind of, how long is that going to last, Okay, so make sure you study all the other areas in early adulthood, because I didn't go over all of them clearly.